During a high school class project, my teacher told me it's unrealistic being a CEO. It's been my dream to be a CEO since I was 10, so I told her it is realistic. Follow me on my journey to learn what it takes to become a CEO.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Realistic CEO podcast. Today I'm here with Laurie. How are you doing today, Laurie?
So good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on today.
Of course.
Appreciate it. So the first question I want to ask you is, can you tell us a little bit about what you guys do here at Link to Libraries?
Absolutely. So our whole mission at Link to Libraries is to get books into the hands of the kids who need them. Because we know from research that the only way for a child to succeed in life is for them to succeed in school. And the only way you can succeed in school is if you can read. And even though in Massachusetts we have one of the best public school systems in the country, in Western Massachusetts, 70% of the third graders we serve cannot read at grade level. 70%. It's a huge number. And third grade is incredibly important because that's the year kids shift from learning to read to reading to learn. So the research shows that if they can't read proficiently by the end of third grade, the chances of them ever catching up get slimmer and slimmer. Our job is to go into classrooms, get books into the hands of kids that they can take home and keep and have books in their own homes, and to help school libraries who are tremendously underfunded have the books that they need that attract the kids to update their collection so that kids want to check out books and bring them home too.
So why do you think that a lot of these third graders aren't able to read at their grade level?
I think it's a combination of so many things. I know that for a fact COVID did not help. COVID made the numbers a lot worse. It was already bad, but COVID definitely set kids back because they weren't in a conducive learning environment. I think that nowadays we're not setting great examples for our kids. We go home and we're all staring into these little devices all the time, and they don't see us picking up books and reading. They don't see us talking about books as much as we maybe used to. And I think it's hard. I think we're not modeling great reading behavior for them. I think when you live in a family sometimes and kids are facing enormous challenges. They have tough home lives. They are worried about next meals. And those things also impact a kid's ability to learn and to read or learn to perform in school. So I think there are a number of factors.
So what are some ways that parents at home can make sure that their kids are wanting to pick up books and wanting to learn by reading?
Such a good question. I'm so glad you asked that. So number one thing, reading is not just for school. Right? In order for a kid to understand that it's important to read, they have to understand that you need it for your everyday life, right? If we're not modeling for kids at home how important reading is, they're not going to pick up on that message, and they're going to think, oh, it's just something I have to do to get through another school day, right? So I think that parents can, instead of maybe take a little break from the phone, put the phone down and pick up a book. Pick up a newspaper, pick up a magazine, show a child that you're reading, have reading time together. Read stories aloud together. When they're little, you can read stories to them. As they get older and they become readers, have them read stories to you. There are lots of different ways to incorporate that. If you're going on a trip, if you're going to a museum, or if you're going to the beach for a day, or whatever it might be, have someone look up on a computer or on a tablet or whatever it is and do a little research about what they might want to do when they get there. There are lots of little tricks. Read road signs, play the license plate game. All those things count and add up.
Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to how you got to become the CEO of Link to Libraries?
Sure, it's a little bit like this. I didn't start out, I started out my career in the United States Senate. I was press secretary for a senator in Washington, D.C. And I was doing a lot of speech writing and interviews and those sorts of things. We moved to Western Massachusetts when my kids were little, and I started my own business where I was helping companies give away their philanthropic dollars in a way that had a bigger impact on the associations that they were supporting and the causes they were supporting, and also had a better impact for them as a company. Through that, I became a volunteer for Link to Libraries. So I was a reader. So every month I'd go into this classroom and I'd read books aloud and give away books to the kids, and fell in love with it. It was one of the best volunteer experiences I'd ever had. So I did that for a number of years, and then the woman who founded this organization, Sue Kaplan, came to a point where she was ready to retire, and the organization decided it needed to hire someone to run the organization going forward. And so she said, would you be interested? And I said, Yeah, I've never run a nonprofit before. Are you sure? And so went through the interview process, and they put their faith in me. And even though it was something I'd never done before, it's been enormously rewarding. We've grown tremendously over the years. We survived COVID, which is a really tough time for nonprofits. So that's the twisty way I got here.
So what is a press secretary? 'Cause I've never heard of that before.
Sure. Okay, a press secretary is the person in the office of, it could be a senator or a representative or a governor or a CEO of a company. It's the person who crafts the story, just like you wrote the book. You write this short little brief story, and you're the one who sends it out to the media when something happens, when you're trying to announce something that you want to get attention. So you send it out to the media, and then say the Springfield Republican sees it, and they're interested. And so they call you up, and then they want to schedule an interview with the senator, with the CEO, whoever it is. So it's helping create the news. That's how most of the things in the paper get in the paper or on the radio.
How are you able to use that job experience and translate it to being the CEO of Link to Libraries?
Such a good question. Yeah, that's a great question. Because I think that a lot of what we do at Link to Libraries is one of the ways that we stay alive is through the support of the community. We are dependent on foundations and private donations to keep us running, to keep all these books here so that we can give them to kids. And one of the ways that we can do that is we communicate the success we're having. We communicate the need in the community. So I'm always putting things out there, press releases, reaching out to the media to help me tell the story so that people know about us, they want to volunteer for us, and they want to help support us.
So how are you able to get sponsors for these schools? Because I want to be able to get sponsors for my books. Like, how are you able to do that?
So it's the same thing. You tell the story. And I think once people realize that there really is a problem out there and that they can have a real impact, then oftentimes they do want to step up and sponsor a school. The nice thing about Link to Libraries, I think, is that it's more than just writing a check. So it's really easy to write a check sometimes and forget about it. But we offer people, and you can do that, but you can also become more involved. So a lot of these businesses that you see around here that are sponsors, also their employees read in the schools. So it's more of an inclusive, everybody gets involved. And I think that's been something that we've gotten a lot of positive feedback about.
Like, when you're networking with these businesses, what are like the common goals that you guys, both you and the business that you're working with, have?
Sure. And Western Mass is a really special place because it's a small community, right? And there's a lot of connection between different people and families and businesses and these sorts of things. And so people are really invested in the community here. Just like you walked in and you saw the Balliet box, right? So you have a connection to Balliet. A lot of these people are from Western Massachusetts. They went to the schools here. They care about the schools here. They remember them. And so building on that connection and talking to them about what the need is generally is a great way to do it.
So when you're going into these schools and reading to these kids and giving them books, like, what are like the reactions that these kids have?
It's the best. It's the best. You're like Santa Claus once a month. So you go in, and a lot of times we're very mindful of the fact that the children that we serve come from difficult circumstances. And everything they have is a hand-me-down, pretty much. They've got clothes and everything. So we give away brand new books because we think it's really special to give someone a brand new gift that no one else has owned before. It is just yours. And then that kid, it really becomes a treasure. So it's so cute. They pick their own book. We don't hand them books. They go up and they pick their own. And then they all smell them. It's mine, and I don't know why people smell books, but they smell them, and then the next thing they want to know is, can I write my name in it? They want to claim it. They want it to be theirs. And then they take it home, and we hear time and time again that once those books go home with the kids, oftentimes they'll share them with siblings, share them with their parents, share them with cousins or friends who come over. So there's a ripple effect, too, which is really great.
Seeing these kids' reactions and when they get their new books and then they want to share these books at home, would you say that is also helping with the parents as well?
Absolutely. I think any parent, when you see that your kid's excited about something, I don't think a lot of people don't know how important it is to be reading with your kids as much as possible. A lot of parents are exhausted and working 2 jobs and trying to support the family, and they may they're tired. But once you can see this little spark in your kid, I think the hope is that you want to keep nurturing that. And it's a great activity. You're not staring at a screen, you're interacting. So, yeah.
As a CEO of a nonprofit, what are some things that are very similar to being a nonprofit versus being a for-profit business?
It's the same sort of the day-to-day runnings of a business are the day-to-day runnings of a business. So I think there are a lot of similarities there. We have to do marketing. We have to do fundraising. We have to bring in money to help us do what we do. That's a little bit different. You don't have to do that necessarily when you're in a regular business. You have to sell. We're going out and getting the money from the community. To manage, we have 200 volunteers. So I'm managing 200 people and their schedules and their needs and those sorts of things. So in some ways, it's very similar. I think that there's a lot of, when you're working for a nonprofit, there's a lot of getting out into the community and being a part of events and those sorts of things so that you're visible and people know that you're out there so that they can be a part of what's going on. I think it's very similar. I think the tax laws are different and we have to follow certain rules as a nonprofit that at for-profit businesses don't need to follow. But other than that, it's the same as running any business.
So what was it about Linked to Libraries that made you want to be the CEO of it?
Because I witnessed that it works. As a volunteer reader, I always tell this story. I had this great girl I was reading this third grade class in Springfield at the old, I can't remember the name of the school, but I was reading to this girl and she never wanted to take a book home. And I'd never had that before. I'd never had a kid who didn't want to take a free book home. So I went up to her afterwards and I said, why? And she said, I don't like to read. But one day I came in and the book I read aloud had to do with baseball. And I noticed that she paid attention for the first time and she joined in the discussion for the first time. So I went up to her afterwards and I said, are you a baseball fan? And she said, yeah. She said, my grandfather promised me that before he dies, he's going to take me to a Red Sox game. So I was like, okay. So then every time I went, I made sure to bring a book about baseball. And she started taking them home. And she started reading. And she became a better reader. And a kid who was a real struggling reader and was having a really tough time at school, by the end of that school year, she was a changed kid. So I saw it firsthand. And that just made me a believer and wanted to be a part of something that was bigger than myself.
Going based off of that example of the girl that she didn't, quote unquote, to read, but it's because she didn't have books that she can connect with.
Exactly.
So, like, how are you able to make sure that you're bringing books to these kids that they can learn how to become better readers, but also are connecting with the book as well?
Absolutely. One of the biggest things, I think, is making sure that the books that we're bringing and giving to the kids have characters in them that look like the kids in their classroom. Kids like to see themselves in books. We like to read books, too, to learn about other people, but we also like to see, kids especially like to see themselves represented in books. We make really sure at Linked to Libraries that we are giving out books that represent cultural diversity, that are on a wide range of topics, because we know kids have a wide range of interests. So there are sports books, and there are puppy books, and there are adventure books, and scary books, and all those sorts of things. I'm trying to keep abreast of what our readers are talking to the kids in the classroom, asking kids what they like to read, and if we can, tailoring the books to those needs. So I think the biggest thing is just giving them books that excite them, that look new and have great covers, but also where they can relate to it somehow.
So why do you think that when kids that don't like to read, when they find a book that they can relate to, they just love reading all of a sudden? Sometimes
it takes just one book can turn a kid right around. It's just they've never connected with it before, so it's a struggle. They feel like they're being forced to do it. I was talking with your dad earlier about graphic novels. So a lot of people for a long time dismissed graphic novels and didn't count them as books. They called them comic books, right? And there have been a lot of studies since that show that's not true. It counts as reading. You are following a story. You are following characters. You're learning vocabulary. But there are lots more pictures, and there's fewer text. So you're not faced with opening up a book and just seeing line after line of text. You open it up and it's exciting, and oftentimes that can draw a kid in and make them interested, and they start reading those, and then they graduate to other books. But it's just like you just got to find that right one, right? That turns them around.
So were you a avid reader when you were younger?
I was. I've always been a big reader. Yeah, and for me, the book that turned me around was a book called To Kill a Mockingbird. That is my favorite book of all time. To this day, I still read it at least once or twice a year just because I love it so much. I know what that means when you find something that just opens up your whole world and you're like, all right, this isn't just work. This is entertaining and fun. And we live in a world with a lot of fighting, a lot of people misunderstanding each other. And I think books are an incredibly important way to help teach empathy, to help kids learn about different cultures and different religions, different races, whatever it is. It can be a bridge between people. So I think that's really important.
As the CEO of a nonprofit, can you explain a little what the day-by-day is?
The best part about being the CEO for this nonprofit in particular, I can only speak to Link to Libraries because it's the only one I've done, but it's a lot. You're changing your hat all the time. One minute you're managing volunteers, the next minute you're going over the budget and the finances, the next minute you're out in the community at an event. It's hard to say day to day because day to day is so different. But I love that. I think that's really exciting. I like moving back and forth between topics and issues and things like that. So there's never a week where I come in and I sit at a desk from 9 to 5 and clock out at the end. It's always doing lots of different things, and I love that.
So one thing that you always talk about is like the community and how important it is as a nonprofit to be involved in the community.
Yes.
So like, how are you able to make sure that you're involved with the community as much as you want?
A lot of that has to do with networking, like you were talking about earlier. So there are a lot of organizations in this area that are doing a lot of good and a lot of working with kids. I think that we're all stronger when we work together. And so organizations like Square One, for instance, it's out there doing amazing work with preschoolers and with kids in the community. They're doing their thing. We're serving kids too. I'll contact them and I'll say, hey, I've got all these books. Do you guys need books for what you're doing? And so we bridge the gap that way and form partnerships with each other. Going out there, the more you're visible in the community, local companies take notice. And so they want to partner with you and do different projects in schools and in the community. So it's all about building bridges and reaching out and not being so me, but realizing that we're stronger when we're working together.
So as a leader, what are some important characteristics that you need to have to make sure that you are a good leader?
You have to be a good listener, for sure. I think you have to be open to listening to people, open to learning new things. I think you have to be curious. Whatever field you're in, read as much as you can about it, learn as much as you can. There's a lot of science behind reading, and it changes all the time. So we're learning all the time, and I try and keep it abreast of that. Being flexible, I think, is also really important. You got to be able to flip hats when you need to quickly and easily. Respecting people's time. When you have a meeting, make sure you show up early. Everybody's busy, and I'm so thankful for people who take time to talk about Link to Libraries, and so I always make sure I'm respectful of that. And take risks. Just because you haven't tried something before doesn't mean it's a bad idea. So within reason, you gotta, but I think taking risks for me is something, taking this job was a huge risk. It wasn't something that I had done before. It was different. I'm able to use the skills I learned over the years, but it wasn't necessarily a perfect fit in the beginning, but it's grown to be this wonderful thing.
You said there's a science behind reading. How are you able to make sure that you are able to understand that reading is not just about going to school and trying to pass the English? Like, how do you make sure that you actually get that message across, that reading is very important?
That's why our volunteer Read Out Loud program is so important, because we have 200 people who are out there once a month going into these classrooms and telling these kids, this is how I use reading in my life. These are the books that I like to read at home. Sharing stories, taking time out of when you see the president of XL Dryer take time out of his day to come into a classroom and read, those kids notice. The message is, this is important, and I'm taking time out to do it, and so should you.
So what are some ways that you're able to get that message across to the parents, not just the kids?
We do work mostly with kids. We don't deal as directly with parents, but every time we can, every time I'm out in the public, every time I do an interview like this or on TV or whatever it is, I make sure to talk about the importance of reading at home and setting a good example at home and encouraging your kids. Don't make reading a punishment. It breaks my heart. I hear all the time, you guys have been fighting everybody in their own corners and you have to read for 15 minutes. That's horrible, right? Like, don't make it a punishment. It should be a good thing. It should be a fun thing that you can do together.
I have a couple more questions I want to ask you.
Of course.
In the book, Tony talks about the LBW, the long, lonely, boring work. Can you explain the long, lonely, boring work that you had to do?
Sure. I love that. I'd never heard that term before, and I love it because it's true. And every job everywhere has some of that stuff that you have to do. You got to do the paperwork, right? You got to do the finances and the budgets and all that kind of stuff. I personally find that to be long, lonely, boring work. That's not my favorite part of this job. Other things that we have to do all the time is all these books around us. We're surrounded by 37,000 books right now, and all of them have a label on the back, and that takes manpower. So we get shipments of books in, and we spend hours and hours labeling books. Not particularly exciting, but that's the kind of long, boring, lonely, boring work. that when you bring in people and do it together, you can make it a little bit more fun. So I would highly recommend anytime you have the opportunity to make that long, lonely, boring work less lonely, do it. And other times you just have to put your head down and get it done and know that there's fun stuff around the corner.
How are you able to balance your work life and your family life?
That's hard. I work on that all the time because it's very easy, especially when you care passionately about something, to let it creep into over hours. It's hard. And now with remote work, it's hard to turn it off. But I think over the years, I've learned that I'm my best leader when I do have balance in my life, when I make sure I take time to spend time with my family and friends, when I take time to read and learn the things I want to, take time to be creative and those sorts of things. It's just, you got to force yourself to do it because it is easy to get sucked into working all the time because we're a lean and mean organization and there's a lot of work to do. So you could do it, but you're better for everyone when you take time out for yourself.
So like, you said that you're with remote and you care so much about your job. So like, how are you able to make sure that you're doing your best to shut it down? Because sometimes you might go overboard.
Sometimes you do, and we have seasons. We followed the school year season because we do most of our work through the schools. So there are seasons where it's harder to shut it off than others, but I also know that there are going to be lulls too. And so when those quiet times come around, take advantage of them. It's okay. Because you know there are going to be other times in your life where you've got to put in longer days. So I think that's what works best for me, is that I stopped feeling guilty about when you have a moment to take a breath. It's okay, take it. You're going to need it later.
Okay. It's actually good, because I've actually never heard somebody say that before.
Oh, yeah. Good. Yeah, no, I think it's really important. My mom was sick and she had Alzheimer's, and it was a very tough thing for our whole family. And you go through something like that and you realize life is short and unpredictable, and you do your best at work, but you also got to take care of yourself and your family.
So for the last question, I want to ask you, I'm going to keep it lighthearted. So what is a fun fact about yourself?
A fun fact about myself. All right, this is a really weird one. This is always the one. I had 3 sets of adult teeth.
3?
The strangest personal fact, I know. But instead of just losing my teeth, I had 3 sets of adult teeth. I was like a shark when I was a kid.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on.
Oh my gosh, it was great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you guys for watching this episode of the Realistic CEO podcast. See you guys in the next one. Peace.